The interview hall. The crystalline towers of the Galactic Trade Center pierce the artificial sky of Station Nexus like frozen lightning. Kira Chen pressed her trembling palm against the cool metal of the entrance scanner, her heart hammering as the massive doors whispered open to reveal a world she'd only seen in holovids. The main lobby stretched before her like a cathedral of commerce, its walls lined with shimmering displays showing trade routes that spanned thousands of star systems. Beings from dozens of worlds moved through the space with confident purpose. Tall, ethereal Zephyrians with their flowing robes, stocky Terran merchants in pressed uniforms, and sleek Valorian diplomats whose skin shifted colors with their moods. Kira adjusted the strap of her worn travel bag and tried to calm her breathing. 3 years of advanced linguistics study on Kepler Station, countless hours practicing Standard Galactic and 12 other languages, and still she felt like a child lost among titans. "Next applicant," called a bored voice from the reception desk. Kira approached on unsteady legs. Behind the curved desk sat a Valorian male, his emerald skin marked with the geometric tattoos that indicated high social status on his own world. His name tag read, Vex Corin, Senior Applications Coordinator. "Good morning," Kira began in carefully practiced Standard Galactic. "I'm here for the translator position interview. My name is Kira Chen." Vex looked up from his holo-tablet, his large amber eyes scanning her simple gray jumpsuit and nervous posture. When she spoke again, providing her identification code, his expression shifted to one of barely concealed amusement. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice carrying easily across the nearby seating area. "A rimworlder. Let me guess. Kepler Station? No, wait, that accent is definitely Outer Colonies. Titan's Edge, perhaps?" Heat flooded Kira's cheeks. Her accent had always marked her as different, but she'd hoped in a place like this, where diversity was supposedly celebrated, it wouldn't matter. "I'm from the Kepler Agricultural Collective," she said quietly, hating how her voice wavered. Vex leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile playing at his lips. "Agricultural Collective. How quaint. And you think you can work in diplomatic translation with that provincial drawl? My dear, we conduct business with sector governors and trade ministers here, not farmers." Several nearby applicants turned to look, some smirking at the spectacle. Kira felt herself shrinking inward, her carefully rehearsed confidence crumbling like paper in vacuum. I studied at the academy," she whispered. "I have certifications in—" "Listen, sweetheart," Vex interrupted, his tone dripping with condescension. "Why don't you save yourself the embarrassment? There's probably a nice agricultural station somewhere that needs someone to translate grain shipment manifests. Much more your speed." The words hit Kira like physical blows. She stood frozen, clutching her credentials tablet, feeling the weight of every stare, every barely suppressed laugh from the other applicants. That's when the voice cut through the lobby like a blade through silk. "Coordinator Corin." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Vex's smugness evaporated instantly as he looked up to see a tall human male approaching the desk. Captain Marcus Reed moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to command, his dark uniform bearing the silver insignia of a senior trade administrator. "Captain Reed," he stammered, suddenly sitting straighter. "I was just screening the applicants as instructed." "Screening. I see. And does your screening process typically involve public humiliation of qualified candidates?" "Sir, I was merely pointing out that certain linguistic backgrounds might not be suitable for our high-level diplomatic work." Marcus turned his attention to Kira, and she was surprised to see his expression soften completely. "Miss Chen, is it? I couldn't help but overhear your introduction. Your pronunciation of Standard Galactic is quite precise. Where did you study?"
First impressions. "The Kepler Linguistic Academy," Kira managed, her voice still shaky from the confrontation. "I completed the Advanced Xenolinguistics program." Marcus nodded approvingly. Kepler Academy has an excellent reputation. Their graduates are among the most sought-after translators in this sector. He glanced meaningfully at Vex, whose green skin had taken on a pale, sickly hue. Perhaps Coordinator Corin wasn't aware of that fact. Of course I knew, Vex mumbled, suddenly very interested in his holotablet. Ms. Chen, Marcus continued, his attention returning to her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Would you mind accompanying me to Conference Room 7? I'd like to conduct your interview personally. Kira blinked in surprise. You want to interview me? A small smile tugged at the corner of Marcus's mouth. I supervise all senior translation positions. Besides, I'm curious to hear more about your qualifications. He gestured toward a corridor lined with frosted glass doors. Shall we? As they walked away from the reception area, Kira caught a glimpse of Vex's expression, a mixture of embarrassment and barely contained fury. Several other applicants watched with newfound respect as she followed the imposing human captain down the hall. Conference Room 7 was elegant in its simplicity, a polished table surrounded by comfortable chairs, with a wall-mounted display showing a slowly rotating star map. Marcus gestured for her to sit, then settled across from her with fluid grace. First, let me apologize for Coordinator Corin's behavior. That kind of prejudice has no place here. Thank you, Kira said softly, though I suppose I should be used to it by now. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You should never have to be used to it. Now, tell me about your studies. What languages do you speak? As Kira began describing her academic background, something remarkable happened. The nervous tremor left her voice, replaced by genuine passion, as she discussed the intricacies of Zephyrian tonal patterns and the complex grammatical structures of ancient Terran dialects. She found herself relaxing under Marcus's attentive gaze, encouraged by his thoughtful questions and obvious knowledge of the field. Impressive, he said when she finished. 12 languages fluently, with conversational ability in 6 more? And you specialized in real-time diplomatic translation? Yes, sir. I wrote my thesis on maintaining cultural context during high-stakes negotiations. Language isn't just about words, it's about understanding the entire cultural framework that gives those words meaning. Marcus's eyes lit up with genuine interest. Exactly. Too many translators focus purely on linguistic accuracy and miss the cultural nuances that can make or break a negotiation. He paused, studying her face. Tell me, Miss Chen, what drew you to this field? Kira felt heat rise in her cheeks as his intense gray eyes held hers. Growing up on an agricultural collective, we hosted traders from dozens of different worlds. I was fascinated by how the same concept could be expressed so differently depending on someone's cultural background. I wanted to help bridge those gaps, to help people truly understand each other. And what makes you think you'd be effective in a high-pressure environment like the Galactic Trade Center? This time, Kira didn't hesitate. Because I know what it's like to be misunderstood. I know how it feels when someone dismisses you because of how you sound rather than listening to what you're saying. That makes me more determined to ensure every voice is heard accurately. Marcus sat back, a slow smile spreading across his face. Outstanding! Ms. Chen, I'm prepared to offer you a position as Junior Translation Specialist with direct assignment to the Diplomatic Relations Division. Kira's breath caught. You're offering me the job? Just like that? Just like that. Marcus stood, extending his hand, though I should warn you, you'll be working closely with my team on some very sensitive negotiations. Long hours, complex materials, high stakes. Think you can handle it? Kira rose and clasped his hand, surprised by the warmth of his skin and the strength of his grip. Yes, sir, I won't disappoint you. I have a feeling disappointment is the last thing I need to worry about with you. Marcus held her hand, perhaps a moment longer than strictly professional, before releasing it. Welcome aboard, Kira. Can I call you Kira? Of course, Captain Reed. Marcus, he corrected gently. We don't stand much on ceremony in my department. Can you start tomorrow? I can start tomorrow if you need me to. He chuckled, a rich sound that sent an unexpected flutter through Kira's chest. Eager. I like that. Tomorrow it is.
Growing closer. 3 weeks into her new position, Kira found herself working later and later each evening. The Diplomatic Relations Division never truly slept. With trade negotiations spanning multiple time zones across the galaxy, there was always some critical document requiring translation or cultural interpretation. Tonight, the office was nearly empty save for the soft blue glow of her workstation and the gentle hum of the environmental systems. Kira rubbed her tired eyes and stretched, trying to work out the knots in her shoulders from hours hunched over complex Zephyrian trade agreements. Still here? She turned to find Marcus standing in the doorway, his uniform jacket draped over one arm, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. Even disheveled from his own long day, he managed to look effortlessly commanding. The Zephyrian delegation wants these contracts reviewed before tomorrow's session, Kira explained, gesturing at the holographic text floating above her desk. Their grammatical structure is incredibly complex. One misplaced modifier could change the entire meaning of a trade clause. Marcus approached her workstation, and Kira caught a subtle hint of his cologne, something warm and woodsy that made her pulse quicken. Mind if I take a look? Of course. She shifted her chair to make room, acutely aware of his proximity as he leaned over to examine the floating text. This passage here, he said, pointing to a particularly dense section. They're using the formal diplomatic register, but there's something else. Cultural significance, Kira finished, their voices overlapping. The word choice implies they're treating this as more than a standard trade agreement. It's almost like a courtship ritual. Marcus straightened, looking at her with newfound respect. Exactly. Most translators would have missed that nuance entirely. He pulled up a chair beside her. The Zephyrians don't just do business, they form relationships. How would you suggest we respond? For the next hour, they worked side by side, crafting responses that honored both the legal requirements and the cultural expectations embedded in the Zephyrian language. Kira found herself relaxing completely for the first time in weeks, energized by Marcus's quick understanding and thoughtful contributions. You're brilliant at this, Marcus said as they finalized the last document. I've never seen anyone pick up on cultural subtleties so quickly. Kira felt warmth spread through her chest at the praise. Thank you, though I have to admit, working with someone who actually understands the bigger picture makes all the difference. Is that so? Marcus's voice had dropped to a softer register, and when Kira looked up, she found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The other departments, they tend to treat translation as purely mechanical, input text, output equivalent text. They don't realize that language is alive, that it carries the soul of a culture within it. And you do realize that. It wasn't a question. Marcus had shifted closer, his knee almost touching hers. I try to. Kira's voice came out breathier than she intended. Language is intimate. When you truly understand how someone speaks, you understand how they think, how they feel, how they love, Marcus added quietly. The words hung between them, charged with meaning. Kira's breath caught as she met his gaze, seeing something warm and hungry in those gray depths that made her stomach flutter with anticipation. Marcus, she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin with infinite gentleness. You're extraordinary, Kira. Not just your mind, though that's incredible. You're you. Before she could respond, his lips were on hers, soft and warm and perfect. The kiss started gentle, questioning, but when Kira melted into him with a soft sigh, it deepened. Her hands found the solid warmth of his chest as his arms drew her closer, and for a moment, the rest of the universe simply ceased to exist. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. That was, he began. Inevitable, Kira finished with a shaky laugh. I've been wanting to do that since my first day. Only since then, Marcus smiled, his thumb still tracing patterns on her cheek. I've been thinking about it since the moment I saw you standing up to Vex's ignorance with such quiet dignity. We should probably, Kira gestured vaguely at the office around them. Go to dinner, Marcus finished firmly. Somewhere quiet where we can talk without interruption. Is that wise? You're my supervisor. Marcus's expression grew serious. If it makes you uncomfortable, we don't have to pursue this. Your career will never be affected, either way. But Kira,
He caught her hands in his. "I haven't felt this way about anyone in years. You've turned my carefully ordered world completely upside down." Kira studied his face, seeing honesty and vulnerability beneath his usual confident composure. "My world was never that ordered to begin with," she admitted with a smile. "Maybe that's exactly what we both need." His answering grin was radiant. "Tomorrow night, I know a place that serves authentic Terran cuisine." "It's a date," Kira said, then laughed at the wonder in her own voice. "Literally." As Marcus helped her gather her things, Kira caught sight of Vex passing by the office windows. The Valorian's expression was thunderous as he took in the scene, but for the first time since arriving at the trade center, Kira didn't care about his disapproval. She had found something far more valuable than professional acceptance. She had found someone who saw her exactly as she was and valued every part of it.
Challenges and confessions. 2 months had passed since that first kiss, and Kira's life had transformed in ways she'd never imagined. Her professional reputation had flourished under Marcus's mentorship, but more importantly, their relationship had deepened into something that left her breathless with its intensity. Tonight, however, the trade center buzzed with crisis energy. The Andromedan Consortium had unexpectedly withdrawn from the Sigma Quadrant peace accords, threatening to destabilize trade routes that millions depended upon. Emergency sessions had been called, and every translator was working around the clock. "The Andromedan ambassador is requesting a private audience," Marcus announced as he entered the translation bay where Kira was working with 3 other specialists. "They're speaking an old Andromedan, formal, ceremonial dialect. I need someone who can handle not just the language, but the cultural implications." All eyes turned to Kira. Old Andromedan was notoriously complex, with layers of meaning embedded in tonal variations that could take years to master. "I can do it," she said quietly, ignoring the skeptical looks from her colleagues. Vex, who had been lurking nearby since the crisis began, stepped forward with a malicious smile. "Captain Reed, surely you're not considering sending someone so inexperienced to handle negotiations of this magnitude? The Rim colonies hardly prepared her for this level of diplomatic complexity." "I studied Old Andromedan for 2 years," Kira said firmly, standing to face him. "My thesis advisor was Dr. Yellen Morthok, who literally wrote the definitive guide to Andromedan ceremonial language." "Academic study is one thing," Vex continued smoothly, "but this requires someone with real-world experience. Perhaps I should handle this translation myself." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Your expertise is in trade documentation, Corin. This requires someone with deep cultural understanding." He turned to Kira, his professional mask firmly in place despite the warmth in his eyes. "Are you confident you can handle this?" "Yes, sir," Kira replied, matching his formal tone even as her heart raced with both anticipation and fear. The next 3 hours were the most challenging of Kira's career. Ambassador Zethara spoke in the ancient dialect reserved for matters of life and death, her words layered with historical references that carried the weight of millennia. But as Kira translated, she found herself understanding not just the words, but the profound grief and fear beneath them. "She's not just withdrawing from the Accords," Kira murmured to Marcus during a brief recess. "Her people are dying, some kind of quantum plague affecting their homeland. She's trying to reallocate resources, but she can't say so directly. It would show weakness to their enemies." Marcus studied her intently. "Are you certain?" Kira glanced at the notes she'd made about the grammatical patterns. "The linguistic patterns don't lie. When she uses the phrase, 'Star children must return to the source,' she's referencing an ancient Andromedan funeral rite. The metaphor is clear once you understand the cultural context." When negotiations resumed, Marcus made a subtle adjustment to the consortium's offer, including provisions for humanitarian aid that could be disguised as standard trade benefits. Ambassador Zethara's relief was palpable, though she maintained perfect diplomatic composure. The session concluded with a preliminary agreement that would save both the peace accords and thousands of Andromedan lives. "Brilliant work," Marcus said as they walked back to his office, his voice thick with pride and something deeper. I couldn't have done it without your strategic insights, Kira replied, still buzzing with adrenaline from the successful negotiation. Yes, you could have. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. Kira, what you did in there, that wasn't just translation. That was true understanding, the kind that bridges worlds. They had reached his private office, and Marcus sealed the door behind them. The moment they were alone, his professional composure cracked. I was terrified, not of the negotiations failing, but of watching you doubt yourself again. When Vex questioned your abilities, I'm learning not to let him get to me, Kira said, melting into the solid warmth of his embrace. Having someone who believes in me makes all the difference. I more than believe in you. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes intense with emotion. I'm in love with you, Kira. Completely, desperately in love with you. The words hit her like a physical force, stealing her breath. Marcus, I know it complicates everything, he continued urgently. I know it puts us both in a difficult position professionally. But watching you work today, seeing your brilliance and courage, I can't keep pretending this is just attraction. Kira reached up to cover his hands with hers. You don't have to pretend anything. I love you too. I think I have since that first day when you stood up for me. Marcus's response was immediate and fierce. His mouth claimed hers with desperate hunger, and Kira responded with equal passion, months of careful restraint finally breaking free. They moved together toward the small couch in his office, hands exploring, boundaries dissolving. Are you sure? Marcus whispered against her neck, his lips trailing fire along her skin. I've never been more sure of anything, Kira gasped, her fingers working at the fasteners of his uniform. What followed was tender and passionate and perfect. Two souls finally allowing themselves to be completely vulnerable with each other. Marcus worshipped her body with gentle reverence, while Kira discovered new depths of sensation she'd never imagined possible. Afterwards, they lay entwined on the narrow couch, sharing quiet words and softer kisses as the artificial night settled over the station. What happens now? Kira asked, tracing patterns on Marcus's chest. Now we figure out how to make this work. Whatever it takes, you're worth any complication, any challenge. Even Vex's inevitable complaints to administration? Marcus chuckled, the sound rumbling under her ear. Especially those. Let him try to question your qualifications now. As if summoned by their conversation, an urgent chime sounded from Marcus's communication panel. Captain Reed, we're receiving priority transmissions from the Andromedean homeland. They're requesting Specialist Chen by name for ongoing negotiations. Apparently, she's the only translator they trust to handle their cultural requirements. Marcus and Kira looked at each other, surprise and pride mixing in their expressions. Tell them she'll be available first thing tomorrow, Marcus replied. Then turning to Kira with a grin, I think you just made yourself indispensable. To them or to you? Kira asked with a smile. Definitely both.
New horizons. 6 months later, Kira stood before the panoramic viewport in Marcus's quarters, watching the sleek diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge dock with the Trade Center. The ship would be their home for the next year as they embarked on the Galactic Diplomatic Circuit, a prestigious assignment that would take them to 17 different star systems. Second thoughts? Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Never, Kira said, leaning back against his solid warmth. Though I still can't believe Administrator Vance approved our joint assignment. Marcus chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. After the Andromedean breakthrough, 3 successful peace negotiations, and that trade alliance you personally brokered with the Rigel Collective, even Vance couldn't deny your value. Besides, he added with a wicked grin, I may have mentioned that the Zephyrian delegation specifically requested both of us for their upcoming territorial disputes. You're terrible, Kira said, but she couldn't keep the smile from her voice. What about Vex? He nearly exploded when he heard about our promotion. Coordinator Corin has been reassigned to freight documentation processing, Marcus replied with satisfaction. Apparently his cultural sensitivity evaluations didn't meet the new diversity standards that Administrator Vance implemented after reviewing his performance records. Kira turned in his arms, studying the face that had become so dear to her. The past months had transformed them both. Marcus had grown more relaxed, quicker to smile, while Kira had blossomed into the confident woman she'd always had the potential to be. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, gesturing toward the ship beyond the viewport. "A year together in deep space, navigating the most complex diplomatic challenges in the galaxy? With you as my partner." Marcus's hands found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I can't think of anything I want more." The past months hadn't been without challenges. Their relationship had required careful navigation of professional boundaries, discreet scheduling to avoid conflicts of interest, and more than one difficult conversation with human resources. But their success rate spoke for itself. Together, they had achieved diplomatic breakthroughs that had seemed impossible. "Captain Reed, Specialist Chen," came a voice from the communication panel. "The Harmony's Edge is ready for passenger boarding. Your quarters have been prepared, and the diplomatic materials for the vegan negotiations are already uploaded to your private workspace." "Acknowledged," Marcus replied. "We'll be aboard within an hour." Kira moved to the small desk, where their personal belongings were packed and waiting. Among her things was a small crystal memory cube, a gift from the Andromedan ambassador containing recordings of ancient ceremonies that Kira had helped preserve during their cultural exchange program. "Remember that first day, when you found me at Vex's desk ready to give up? I remember thinking I was watching someone extraordinary be treated terribly. I remember wanting to protect you, and then being amazed when I realized you didn't need protecting. You needed someone to see your worth. You did more than see it. You helped me believe in it. Which brings me to something I've been wanting to ask you." Kira's breath caught as he dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a ring unlike anything she'd ever seen. A band of precious metals from a dozen different worlds, set with a stone that seemed to hold captured starlight. "Kira Chen," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You've taught me that love isn't just about finding someone who compliments you. It's about finding someone who inspires you to become the best version of yourself. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything, professionally, personally, for the rest of our lives?" Tears blurred Kira's vision as she looked down at the man who had changed everything. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course yes." Marcus slipped the ring on her finger, then stood to capture her in a kiss that was tender and passionate and full of promises. When they broke apart, both were laughing and crying at once. "The ring," explained Marcus, holding her hand up to admire it, "has metals from every world we've successfully negotiated peace for. The center stone is from the Andromedan homeworld. Ambassador Yxtara insisted when I asked for her blessing." "You asked for her blessing?" "I asked for several blessings, actually. Turns out having a linguist as a fiancé means understanding the importance of cultural protocol in proposals." Kira laughed, examining the ring more closely. "It's perfect. Absolutely perfect." A gentle chime from the communication system reminded them of their scheduled departure. "Are you ready to start our new adventure?" Marcus asked, offering her his arm with mock formality. "Ready," Kira said, taking his arm and looking once more around the quarters that had been their first home together. "Though I have to say, I'm looking forward to having a bigger couch." The diplomatic quarters on the Harmony's edge have a very nice couch and a much better view. As they walked through the corridors of the Trade Center for the last time as residents, Kira reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she was a nervous girl from the Rim colonies, afraid her accent marked her as inferior. Now, she was senior cultural liaison, engaged to the love of her life, embarking on the adventure of several lifetimes. They paused at the same reception desk where their story had begun. The new clerk, a cheerful, young Terran woman, looked up with a smile. "Safe travels, Captain Reed, Specialist Chen. The whole Trade Center is proud of what you've accomplished." "Thank you," Kira said warmly, no longer afraid to let her natural accent color her words. "Take care of this place while we're gone." As they boarded the Harmony's edge, Kira caught sight of their reflection in the polished metal of the airlock. Two people who had found in each other not just love, but the courage to reach for the stars. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked as they settled into their new quarters, watching the Trade Center grow smaller through the viewport. "I'm thinking," Kira said, curling into his side as the ship jumped to hyperspace, "that the best translations aren't between languages. They're between hearts." Marcus tightened his arms around her, pressing a kiss to her hair as the stars blurred past their window. "I love you, Kira Chen, future Mrs. Reed." "I love you too," she replied, watching the universe open up before them like a promise waiting to be fulfilled.